Let's move to the Showtime Premier Boxing Champions main event. That will be in Phoenix, Arizona. Boy, the Suns blew it in the NBA playoffs, so they don't have a lot to cheer about in Phoenix, except for the hometown fighter, David Benavidez. Benavidez from the Phoenix area has fought there a couple of times recently in his home area, is back there again against a veteran Canadian, David Lemieux. Very interesting that Benavidez is heavily favored to win this one by knockout. Look at that, minus 800 to win this by knockout. Dan Raphael on the BetUS Boxing Show. Do I see an over-under of 4.5 rounds? Typically, again, in boxing on a 12-round fight, under-over would at the minimum be about 6.5 or 7.5 rounds. A lot of times you see 9.5, 10.5. I see an over-under 4.5. That is enticing everybody to look for the Benavidez early knockout or not. Okay, Dan, what is your thought here? Benavidez unbeaten, big-time puncher, Lemieux a veteran. What are your thoughts on this Showtime main event for Saturday night in Phoenix?
Well, I certainly feel like David Benavidez is the rightful favorite. I do think he's going to win. I do think he's going to win by a knockout. When I saw that 4.5 on the over-under, I felt like somebody made a big mistake on that one. To me, that was sort of like free money on the over. And I say that because
I like it. Keep going.
Listen, David Benavidez is a tremendous fighter. He, like you said, he's undefeated. He's won super middleweight world titles twice. And you know, he is the younger fighter, the fresher fighter. But in my look at his career, a couple things. Number one, he's never been the fastest starter in the world. You know, he kind of picks up momentum as the fight goes along. So he's not a guy that you look down the record and see him against solid opponents who's just blitzing out of there in 2-3 rounds. Number one. Number two, David Lemieux, although was at his best when he was a middleweight title holder and is one of the heaviest punchers in boxing, he's not yet really proven himself as a super middleweight, but he can handle himself. And he has been stopped before, but it's not been like blown out in one round. I mean, you know, Triple G, for example, Gennady Golovkin, one of the great punchers of all time, a devastating puncher in his prime especially. Well, they fought when Triple G was in his prime in a middleweight unification fight. And Triple G, at his absolute peak of his career, basically, took him 8 rounds to get rid of David Lemieux. So I just have a hard time seeing Benavidez, who I view as a little bit of a slow starter, of just taking him out that early in the fight. I mean, I do think he'll break him down and wear him out and eventually stop him in this match. But, you know, that early number just, to me anyway, stood out like a sore thumb of like, you know, was somebody got it wrong big time. And like I said, to me, free money on the over.
Well, and what we should say, and Dan, you know this, and for the audience on BetUS, sometimes those lines will move. That line has not moved depending on the wagering, and maybe there's not a lot of wagering on this fight yet. Maybe there'll be some more Saturday before the Saturday night primetime main event in Phoenix. So if a lot of money comes in on the over, that 4.5 will move to 5.5 or to 6.5, and it would surprise me if it does not get some wagering on the over for Benavidez Lemieux we're talking about here, and the line moves up. We'll see if that's the case. You and I are now going to lock in here. Benavidez very much would want a shot, who doesn't, at Canelo Alvarez, who is the undisputed super middleweight champ. This would put Benavidez in the number one spot, essentially, as the WBC number one contender. He's got a lot of motivation. He's at home. I think you and I are in agreement. He's going to win, but we might disagree on how he's going to win. Dan, what do you think here for Benavidez and Lemieux on the outcome?
Well, first of all, the winner of the fight, whether it's David Benavidez or David Lemieux, is going to put themselves in that position because they will acquire the interim belt of the WBC, which will put them in that position to eventually be mandated to fight Canelo Alvarez if he decides to remain in the super middleweight division and hold on to the WBC title. I do think David Benavidez wins by knockout. And even though I said I thought that the 4.5 was a little bit unusual to me, I definitely like the over, but not by a whole lot. You know, I think that fight's like 5 or 6 rounds. You know, maybe a little bit later, but in the end, David Benavidez is going to knock David Lemieux out. You know, David Lemieux has not been very active. David Lemieux is the smaller guy moving up. You know, he's had some fights in the super middleweight division, but they've been basically not by design because he's had trouble making the weight. So he's new to the weight class. Hasn't really fought a top level opponent in quite a while. You know, to me, I believe it's an action fight. It's a good fight. If you're a fan, it's worth watching. It's going to be exciting. But in the end, I think it's definitely a big-time David Benavidez victory, and I don't think it's going to be super tough for him to get there.
Okay, we should make mention again to the audience. They're seeing us on the preview show. We're out on Fridays from here on out. Debut show right here we remind you, you can help us by hitting the like button and hitting subscribe here and share us out on social media. Dan has a massive following. He's going to be sharing it out. I got like a little following compared to what Dan has, but you can help us. You, the audience that's watching this on BetUS, hit that like button, hit the bell that you see there, share this out, but most of all, subscribe to the channel. Spread the word by doing all of those things. We know that more and more fans will see us on BetUS, so there's just a friendly reminder on how you can help the show as we're on the maiden voyage, Dan, Raphael, and I. And we're actually on a little bit of an opposite side with the same guy winning. Dan thinks this is a knockout for Benavides. I think it might go the route. In fact, I'm going to go on the record and say I think Lemieux frustrates him. I think he gives him some problems. I think this goes the route, it goes the distance, and I think that's a much more interesting bet than just the straight bet on Benavides, who right now I think on BetUS is like minus 3,000, just the straight bet to win. The win by decision would be a little bit better, Dan. Go ahead.
Well, we are, at the very least, if you're taking the decision, I'm taking the knockout, but we're both definitely feel like that over-under was misplaced.
Yeah, no doubt. Over 4.5, absolutely. So we'll look at that, and again, we'll circle back on the best bets there. Again, we anticipate that Showtime PBC main event. Again, you've got to have the Showtime premium service, either through your cable or satellite provider or the Showtime, Watch Showtime app, etc. That main event probably around 11 Eastern, 8 Pacific, something like that.
It's going to be later than that. The telecast starts at 10 p.m. Eastern time, and it's a triple header. So it's going to be a late night if you're on the East Coast for that main event.
Going to be probably at least 11:30 or midnight, depending on if they're knockouts in the earlier fights, but it's going to be at least that where they'll stretch it.
I mean, it always depends on how long those fights go. I'm always asked, well, what time does the main event start? And my answer is like, you just don't know, because if the first fight's one round knockout, or if it goes the route, that's the difference of 35, 45 minutes depending on the deal. So I would say you're safe to say if you want to watch it or you're in front of your device, by 11:30ish, you should be good.
Yeah, let me give you an example. The Showtime card last week, Dan knows this, they were fighting in Carson, California. It was a tremendous main event anticipated fight between Jermell Charlo, Brian Castano, undisputed junior middleweight title fight. They've been building it up for weeks and weeks and weeks. So the undercard fight with Jaron Ennis ends up being, a 2-round fight. It's over in the first minute of the second round. They had that complication, so it's over quickly. But the second complication is Castano, the WBO champion, got to the stadium, got to the arena late. How does that happen to your own fight? But he was caught in Southern California traffic. I don't know if he was trying to visit Hollywood. He was late to the stadium. So we sat and waited. And Dan, you've been there 100 times having to hurry up and wait for a main event fight to happen. That one literally took like 45 minutes of talk, stretch it on the Showtime broadcast. We don't think it will be that Saturday, but they will stretch a little if the undercard fights go quickly. That's my point. It was ridiculous last week.
Hey, my man Jim Gray, the great ringside reporter, got to interview basically everybody that was ringside. LL Cool J, other boxers. I thought at one point he was going to maybe hit me up on a Zoom call.
Hey, let's check in with Dan at his home here and what he's thinking right about now on this. Yeah, very true. So that was just the case last week on their fight card. We'll see what happens on this Showtime fight card in Phoenix. And again, we'll recap what we have on the predictions in the best bets.